Hello everyone, it is me Jamie and welcome to my May wrap up. Yes, I'm aware it's a little on the later side. We are like halfway through June. Mind your business. Mind your business. It's here. It's here, okay? So we're doing well. You guys know how these videos work. I'm just gonna go through all the books that I read in May and tell you my thoughts on them. I read 9 books in May, so honestly I feel like we're really getting out of that reading slump that I was in the beginning of the year. So I feel good about that. However, I don't feel good about every single book that I read. I did have at least one 5-star, so silver linings. But yeah, let's just get straight into it. Okay, so the first book that I read in May was Happy Hour by Marla Granados. I actually kind of started this a lot earlier than May, but I finished it in May and I read the majority of it in May. I enjoyed this book. I gave it a 3 stars. This is a literary fiction, I would say, and it's very much kind of like sad girl in the big city kind of vibes. Although I don't know how sad our characters really are. They're kind of just navigating life, I would say. We follow our main character Issa, and she's new to New York City. She's living there with her best friend, and it very much is slice of life. Like, we're in her head and she's really navigating kind of like being poor in the city, being young, hanging out with her friends, and just all the kind of stuff that she gets up to. She goes to bars and drinks, she meets famous guys, she hangs out with her friend. She's just, yeah, it's really the epitome of like a kind of slice of life novel. We are just really following her around a lot of the time, but I think what's really fun about this book is the very like tongue-in-cheek kind of voice that our main character has. Honestly, Issa is just very, very witty. She's very charming. She's very quick with her like quips and her observations on everyone around her, and it offers like a really cool lens of the upper middle class and the sort of people, the sort of privileged people that she's hanging out with. And I feel like it's just kind of like a fun commentary on that, on like classism, I suppose, and social hierarchy. It's honestly just a very like atmospheric novel. I feel like it's actually would be really good for someone to read in the summer. Like, I genuinely feel like I was transported to the Big Apple in the summertime, and it was just a fun read. I kind of did want more from it, to be honest. Like, I feel like I have read very like just vibey, no plot, kind of vibey books before that I've preferred over this one, but I still think it was a fun read and I had a good time with it. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read Done and Dusted by Lila Sage, which is a romance, and I unfortunately gave this one 2 stars. I just was left wanting more, to be honest. One thing that really disappointed me is on the cover, it says a sweet slow burn from, I don't know, a reviewer. It's on the front. There was nothing slow burn about this. I was like, wait, hang on, I have been catfished. No. But okay, sorry, this is a cowboy romance. We follow our main character Clementine, or Emmy, and she is going back to her hometown, which is like a very country, how do you say this? Very Southern American cowboy kind of town, I suppose. In Wyoming actually. She's come back for some sort of injury, I suppose, and she ends up falling into some sort of situation with one of her brother's best friends. It was supposed to be like enemies to lovers. Like, she was always like, oh, this guy, he's always makes fun of me and he's a womanizer and I hate him. But like, they honestly fall into bed together really, really fast. So I kind of couldn't really take it super seriously for that. He ends up helping her like ride horses again because she would like obviously was suffering from this injury, hence why she came back to her small town, and they kind of just start up a romance from there. I just feel like this book was very boring, honestly. I feel like there wasn't really, like, the main central conflict, I suppose, was, yeah, our main guy character Luke being worried that his best friend slash Emmy's brother is gonna like find out about them, and it's just a bit boring. Like, it's kind of like I've seen that before. I feel like there's a lot of showing and not telling here as well. Like, Luke was supposed to be this like real bad boy womanizer, but we never really like saw that side of him, and it would have been interesting if we got to see more of that at the beginning, and then him kind of like changing his ways for Emmy, and Emmy having that kind of like positive influence on him. Like, if we wanted to do a slow burn, it really would, that would be like a good way to do the slow burn. But unfortunately, like, by page 70 they were kissing, so I just didn't buy their chemistry. I didn't buy that they were enemies, so therefore when they kind of like were fighting their attraction for each other, I didn't buy that they were like all of a sudden feeling this way and it was out of nowhere. I just feel like the pacing was off, the progression of the story was off. Like, it was just boring and it just wasn't for me. And I don't know, I do want to give another cowboy romance a go, but like this was my first one and it hasn't really like left that kind of like subgenre of romance in a positive light for me. So I don't know, I didn't really like this one. I'm sorry guys, I just thought it was boring and very nothing, and I'm never gonna think about it ever again. But yeah, 2 stars for Done and Dusted. Oh, then I finished my reread of Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas, and honestly this was such a fun little reread. I gave the book 4 stars, which is the same rating that I gave it back when I first read it in 2019 when I read it for the first time. I feel like 4 stars is a really solid rating for this book, and I really enjoyed it. I honestly, like, rereading this, I was like, oh my god, I can see why I liked this so much back in the day, and I can see why so many people are still picking it up today and discovering Sarah J Maas's worlds for the first time now, and why she's still so popular. Like, say what you want about her, like, her books are fucking fun. Like, her books are really fun. Throne of Glass, this is the first in a YA series, YA fantasy series, and we follow our main character Selena Sardothian, and she is an assassin, and she has been working as a slave in these mines as punishment for all of her crimes. And then one day the crown prince and also the captain of the guard come to this mine and take her, and they save her from these mines and are like, you are going to be participating in these trials that the king is holding, and whoever wins the trials gets to be the king's royal assassin and then can have freedom after a certain period of time. So we're really following Selena as she's, you know, experiencing those games and those trials and fighting for her freedom, while also a lot of other kind of tricky stuff is going on in the world. I mean, the book is definitely packed with content. It's packed with a lot of different storylines, but nothing feels hard to follow, nothing feels convoluted. It's a really like easy fantasy book to read. What I think about Sarah J Maas, and I think why she's so popular, is I just feel like her characters are so strong. Like, maybe her characters aren't the most likable, but I feel like these characters and how they relate to each other, everyone's very, very distinct. And there are so many characters that you can root for, which I think she just does really, really well. I mean, like, obviously there are a lot of characters that get introduced in this series, but no one really feels lost. And especially, I really like how she jumps from like perspective to perspective. Like, one chapter we'll be reading about Selena, then the next chapter we'll be reading about her best friend, and then the next chapter we'll be reading from like Dorian, who's the crown prince. But it never feels clunky, it never feels like out of place, and everyone feels so different and fully fleshed out, and I really, really like that about it. Honestly, I just had a really fun time with this. It was like super comforting to kind of like be back in this vibe, and I cannot wait to continue my reread of the series. Well, I've read my reread of half the series because I didn't actually finish it back in 2019, but I'm excited to finish it this year. So yeah, really glad that I finished my reread of Throne of Glass. This was a good time. I then read The X by Frida McFadden, which is a pretty fun thriller. The last Frida McFadden book I read, because I'm a bit of a fan of her thrillers, I just find like they're really easy, really good to pick up, break a slump, that sort of vibe. The last Frida McFadden I read was really disappointing. I really didn't like it. So I was like, oh no, like, am I kind of falling out of love with her thrillers now? But no, The X was really fun. It really hooked me back in. I gave it 4 stars. Basically, we follow 2 different perspectives in this novel. We follow our main character, Cassie, who has started dating this guy called Joel, and he's really handsome, and we really love him. He's like, she's obsessed with him. She's getting swept up in this new romance. However, she keeps hearing about this ex, whether that be from like friends of his or like just through stalking his social media. She's hearing about this ex who apparently was just like the perfect woman, and she's like really worried that like he's still in love with her and she can't measure up to that woman. And we also hear from the ex, we also hear her perspective. So we're kind of jumping from 2 different perspectives. We're hearing from the ex and maybe seeing why she's not so perfect, and we're also hearing about Cassie. And it was a really addicting read, honestly. It was just a page turner. Like, there's really nothing else I can say for it. Like, it kept me on my toes. I really, like, every time I was picking it up, I just wanted to push through and read more because I was enjoying it so much, and I was enjoying all the twists and turns. And this one did have some really, really good plot twists as well. And I just feel like, yeah, this was just a really fun time. I just really love Frida McFadden. She really gets me out of those slumps. It's just so addicting to read. The pacing was so good. Like, the building of the tension and the mystery was just excellent. I just really, really loved it. And it was just an expertly crafted thriller by Frida McFadden. If you are looking to get into Frida McFadden because you hear everyone talking about her thrillers, me included, this would be a really good one to start with, I think. It's definitely not her most like recognizable, most famous, but it's honestly one of my favorites of hers. So Had a really good time with this. I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Saltwater by Jessica Andrews, which was a little literary fiction that has been sitting on my shelves for a little while, but unfortunately I gave it 2 stars. I really wasn't a fan of this one. I just felt it to be a little nonsensical. I honestly don't even know really how to describe it. Like, I guess we follow our main character Lucy and hearing about her relationship with her mother, moving to a big city. It's kind of all gone in one eye and out the other, to be honest. Like, my brain's really not, I don't know, holding on to anything in this novel. A lot of it was very, once again, like all vibes, no plot, but it just wasn't interesting. And the chapters, I kid you not, are this fucking short. Like, those are all separate chapters, and I feel like we'd jump from like one kind of theme to another, and so it kind of meant like I was kind of sitting there being like, what is this book trying to say? Like, what is this really about? Like, what are the themes of this novel? Like, I know it was a coming of age novel, but like I just didn't care. Like, I really didn't care for it, and I feel like I've read reviews of it and a lot of people are saying like that the writing is just really beautiful, like but I just really wasn't that touched by the writing. It just made me feel a little melancholy, I suppose. Like, the way that things were described were just kind of bleak, and I wasn't given a sense of imagery that I was like really interested in. I was kind of just being like, oh, like that's kind of like gross sounding. I don't know. It definitely got more interesting towards the end. Like, I feel like we kind of fell into a rhythm and we were hearing more about our character a bit more specifically, but like I just didn't really like it. I didn't really like it, and I have really nothing else to say about it because like genuinely, like I read it, I think I read it in like the space of like 2 days, and I was like, a lot of it was me trying to push through and be like, surely we're gonna get somewhere, and I just feel like we never really got somewhere. So this was not for me, sorry, and I don't even think I can say anything else about it because I think I've really blanked it from my memory, which is not great when I'm making a video like this. Oh, we've reached my 5-star read of the month. Check and Mate by Ellie Hazelwood. Guys, I loved it. I loved it. I really love Ellie Hazelwood. I forgot how much I loved her. Like, I read The Love Hypothesis back in 2021 when everyone was raving about it, right? And I gave it 5 stars. And then as time went on, I was like, why did I give The Love Hypothesis 5 stars? That's so crazy of me. And then this year, I've read both Love Theoretically and Check and Mate, both which have been 5 stars. I actually just love her. I just like love her writing. Like, I know that she is like BookTok's darling and everyone's like pushing her for good reason. Honestly, for good reason. I love Check and Mate. It was so good. 5 stars. This is also her first like YA romance, and I don't really give a fuck about YA romances. Like, I'm kind of like, okay, not really for me. I'm a grown woman. I don't really need to read about teenagers falling in love unless it's like a queer story, because as a queer woman I just love reading about like the coming of age queer romances. Anyway, but this one, my god, I mean, it's heterosexuals, sorry, it is heterosexuals. It's the first like heterosexual YA romance that I've loved in a really long time. So what the fuck? I loved it. I also lied. Sorry, I lied. It's not heterosexuals. Our main character, Mallory, is bi, but it is between cis man, cis woman, but our main character is bi, so maybe it is a queer romance. Queer YA romance. Anyway, I just honestly found this so good. I loved it so much. Basically, yeah, we follow Mallory. She's very much the oldest sibling. She lives with her mother and her 2 younger sisters. She's working really hard because her mother is ill, and she's really like keeping the family running. She's working like all these jobs and stuff, and then she ends up getting wrapped up into the world of chess championship, pro chess players, and she catches the eye of a guy called Nolan, who is one of the like champions of chess, but he's also young and hot. So they end up forming some sort of like team relationship. He's obsessed with her, which honestly kind of loved, and it was just so fun. I love Ellie Hazelwood because you can really tell that she's super passionate about like the things that she mentions in her novels. Obviously the STEM books, like she's obviously super passionate about that, and then like reading about like all the chess moves and the world of chess in here, like you can it's really well researched, and I'm not really sure if that's because Ellie Hazelwood's a fucking pro chess player, but it was like so good. It was just so good and so interesting. And it's one of those books where I was like, oh, chess, like I don't know if I'm gonna be like into this like chess romance novel. I very much was into the chess. I very much was. I just loved our characters so much, and the way that the relationship developed was so real. It felt so real and so like true. And I also think I just love Mallory because I'm also the eldest sibling. I'm the eldest sibling of many siblings, so I really get her. I get that sense of responsibility to your family and taking care of people when who's taking care of you, babe? Like, who's taking care of you? Like, I get that. I really get that. And I just loved it. It just made me kick my feet. It made me giggle. I loved it so much. So I cannot wait to read more of Ellie Hazelwood because 5 stars. Amazing. Amazing work. Then I read The Family Game by Catherine Steedman. I actually read this for an exclusive video on my Patreon. I did a bonus episode of my Reading My Physical TBR series, and this is the book that we picked. The Family Game, another thriller. I gave this 4 stars. I really wasn't sure about it at the beginning, and then I ended up really enjoying it. I feel like the 3rd act of the novel was really like thrilling. It was really fun. But basically we follow our main character Harriet, and she is a author, a novelist, a crime novelist actually, from the UK, and she is in this very loving relationship with this American dude. They've moved to New York, and he's from a very rich and powerful family, like billionaires. The sort of family that is like in the public eye and famous purely because of how rich they are. And he has proposed to Harriet, but Harriet's never met the family. So she's meeting the family for the first time, and she's a bit worried because her fiance keeps being like, I don't want them to scare you off, like they're really intense. And she's like, I'm sure I can handle myself. And then all these weird things start happening. Her future father-in-law gives her a tape of like basically a confession to some bad things he's done, as some sort of way to see like if she can be trusted, if she can be part of this family. So she's a bit spooked, a bit scared, and it basically all leads up to this big Christmas event and this big game that they play. Very like Ready or Not vibes, if you've seen that movie, which is one of my favorites. I really wasn't sure at the beginning. Like, I really wasn't sure about our character's motivations. I felt like she was being really fucking silly with some of the decisions she was making. So I was like, I'm not gonna be able to root for this character if she makes these decisions and then gets into these tricky situations, because I'm just sitting here being like, what are you doing, babe? What are you doing? And sometimes it was just a little boring, a little repetitive, and I don't know why things were happening. There was one like scene that I just felt was supposed to be really scary, really thrilling, edge of your seat, but I just found it a bit absurd and a bit silly and ridiculous. But I ended up really liking it at the end. I think it's definitely not like one of the best thrillers I've ever read, but it was super entertaining, and I really liked our character by the end. I was like, oh, she really makes sense to me now. Really enjoyed it by the end, so I think this is definitely a good like Christmas thriller to pick up around December. Then I read a book on my Kindle, and I read There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. This book is a dark romance, and it's silly. It's really silly, but it's the kind of silly that I really enjoyed, honestly. I gave it 3 stars. Obviously not the best romance I've ever read, but it did make me pick up the sequel, so I am currently in the middle of the sequel, so obviously it was good enough for me to keep reading. Basically, we follow 2 rival serial killers who are also artists. They're also pretty successful artists, and they keep trying to one-up each other, not only with their art, but with the way they incorporate their victims, maybe body parts of their victims, into their art. Yeah, really silly, really unrealistic. These men would have been caught by now. But regardless, we're ignoring that. How do I even explain this? I don't even know, like, as I'm trying to explain the plot, it's so convoluted. How do I even explain this? Basically, there's a girl that gets roped into their rivalry against her will, and the less evil serial killer, who is our main character, ends up fighting his attraction to her, but also like giving her a place to like work and connections in the art world, because she's an artist as well. And she's like, oh my god, like I can tell how dangerous he is, like I shouldn't be into him, but I am into him. And they form some sort of romance. So very much a dark romance. It's definitely silly, but it was one of those things where I just like couldn't look away. Like, it was so amusing to me. And I'm excited reading the second book because I feel like we're really going to get some backstory to these characters, because when I was reading this first one, I was like, this is like not good, because why are these characters the way they are? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I think we're going to get more in the second book. But anyway, it was fun, it was entertaining, it was a good book to pass the time. I do really like dark romances sometimes because they honestly feel like thrillers. Like, I loved the kind of like mystery aspect of it and stuff, but there was a lot of things in here that I don't agree with. So even though I enjoy this for the plot, I'm not sitting here going like couple goals, you know what I mean? Like, these men should be in prison. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars. It was fun. Sorry, I explained that so badly. I don't know. Okay, and the final book that I read in May was for my Patreon book club, and that was Penance by Eliza Clark. This was definitely an interesting read. I love is Eliza Clark's debut novel, which is Boy Parts. I love Boy Parts. I think it's a really great, unreliable narrator kind of story. And Eliza Clark really does take a different turn in Penance. It's very, very different, which isn't a bad thing. Like, I love when authors explore different avenues, but I'm just not totally sure how I felt about this. Basically, this book chronicles the murder of a 16-year-old girl by a group of other 16-year-old girl murderers, if that makes sense. And it's told very much like a non-fiction true crime kind of story. So we're reading it in like interviews and articles and that sort of stuff. And I feel like Eliza Clark really does have her finger on the pulse when it comes to this era, because it's set in like 2011, 2012, 2013, when Tumblr really was at its peak. The landscape of Tumblr in 2012 was fucking crazy. It's kind of like you really had to be there. Babe, I was definitely there. And seeing it represented in this book really transported me to this sense of nostalgia that like I didn't really want. Like, it's nostalgia for a time that I think was like great, but also like really damaging to my mental health. And I didn't realize at the time how damaging it was to my mental health, if that even makes sense. I think this book was really well written. I feel like Eliza Clark is a very talented author. She has the sense of humor that I just really resonate with. She understands young people and teenagers. I feel like maybe we're the same age, because I just couldn't get over like how accurate this book was to the times when I was a teenager. So I have a feeling we're the same age, definitely. And I think she's super talented in that regard. She's really, really great at weaving together a story. She's not afraid of like the grisly information and darker subjects and people who are a bit more fucked up, a bit more evil, a bit more morally, not even morally great, just like evil. But my issue is just I'm not a true crime fan, and I found out after reading this that it actually was based on a actual murder case. And the thing is, I feel like this book was trying to talk about the dangers of true crime and some of the ethics or lack thereof that come up in the argument about like, should true crime really exist. But I feel like by being heavily inspired and using a real case kind of works against the message. Like, if this was like an entirely fictional case that has just like come out of her brain, like, sure, I would have been able to be a little bit disturbed, but like be like, yeah, really, really talented. But because it was taken inspiration directly from a real case, I was just a bit like uneasy by that. And I actively don't seek out true crime content. I actively don't do that. I don't like it. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. I really don't like reading about it. Because there are characters in here that are obsessed with true crime. There were some very descriptive accounts of like school shooting cases or like different murderers and things they did, and I just felt like I was reading those things against my will. Like, I just feel like I didn't want to hear about this school shooting case and all of the victims. I didn't want to hear about it in great detail. It just gave me the heebie-jeebies. And honestly, I feel like other people would really like this book, and I think that Eliza Clark, she's very, very talented as a writer. It's just like not my thing in terms of like the true crime element of it. And I feel like if you're critiquing true crime and talking about the ethics and the morality of it all, like, maybe don't use a real case, because then it just feels like a real like true crime novel. Even though it's fiction, it's still inspired by a real case. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about that. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I think it was really well written, and there were times where I just absolutely could not put it down, and I thought the characters were all really well fleshed out. It's just like a taste thing. Yeah. Anyway, 3 stars. So yeah, those are the 9 books that I read in May. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, I love doing my wrap-ups, pretty much like a bit of like a standard video that you see on my channel all the time, but I love doing them. I love hearing about what other people have read in the month. It's where I really get the most of my recommendations, to be honest. But please let me know in the comments what you think of any of these books, if you've read them, if you agree or disagree with my opinions, and let me know what your favorite book was that you read in May. Guys, I love you all so much. Thank you so much for watching. A cheeky reminder that all my socials are linked down below, as well as my Patreon, so if you do want more extra content from me, all of the information is on the page. I love you all so much, and I will see you very, very soon in the next video. Bye!